Kip, what's up, man? So great to see you today. Glad we could do another Ask Me Anything.
Always, always feel like I'm saying the same thing, right? It's always a
We do
pleasure.
too. I
So,
was thinking the
how was
same
your
thing. I was
weekend?
like, I just said it like
Yeah.
that. You've asked me how my weekend was. We got to come up with a new intro.
Yeah.
Get exciting for these people. Weekend was good.
Yeah.
Everything's good. I think we ought to just jump into questions today and just start getting after it for these guys.
I love it. I love it. All right. We're going to field some questions from two primary sources from the Iron Council. And then we snag some questions from our Facebook group. If you haven't joined us there, go to facebook.com/group/orderman. Chris Davis, at our team meeting this morning, I noticed that some of the guys have had off weeks. Please talk about what you do to help get back on track. Thanks.
Well, I think the first thing is just recognizing the reality of the situation. And that reality, as difficult as it is for me to swallow, is that not everything's going to be perfect all the time. I mean, that's hard for a high
Yeah.
achiever. And so what ends up happening for somebody who's hard charging and wants to get 100% all the time is that they end up getting discouraged if they don't. And if you're anything like me, it's an all or nothing mentality. So I'm either 100% or I'm 0%. And if I get 97%, I hate that. Looks like a blemish rather than I got 97% of the things right. It looks like a blemish on my
Totally.
report card. And so I'd rather just burn the whole thing to the ground. And I think a lot of guys feel the same way. You miss a workout or two, or you go on vacation and you don't get back to it, which is something I'm dealing with right now, trying to get back into the swing of things. It's hard when you stumble. It's hard to get back up. So I think accepting the reality that, yeah, you're not going to get 100% all the time. We should strive for 100%, but it's just not going to happen. From there, just recommit to the process. And if you have to start small, momentum is a big factor. I know that going to the gym, for example, is easier when I went to the gym yesterday. And it's easier today if I went for the last 5 days in a row. When it's hard? When I haven't gone for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. That first one back is the hardest thing to do. Same thing with jujitsu, same thing with eating correctly, same thing with managing your bank account, same thing with getting back from vacation and starting your business back up after being gone for a week and a half or 2 weeks. The first restart is the hardest. And we talked about running a race on a track last week. When are you the least efficient on the racetrack? Coming out of the starting block.
Yeah.
You've got a bunch of stored energy and you're trying to position yourself in the starting block the correct way so that when that gun fires,
stride's not quite there yet.
Yeah, you're working against everything at that point. You're working against friction, you're working against gravity, you're working against, like you said, the stride and the mechanics of the proper running form. Where it's most efficient is probably somewhere in the middle of the race. And this is just anecdotal. I'm not saying I have evidence to support this, but anecdotally, I would say the middle of the race. We know why the start of the race is not as efficient as it could be. The middle of the race is when you're on pace, you found your pace, you're not redlining at that point, unless it's a short race, I suppose, and that's a different conversation. But you're not redlining. You've got your stride. You're running and using the proper mechanics. You're not exhausted yet. The end of the race, it's crunch time. It's like, okay, I've got a red line here. I'm exhausted already. I see the finish line and I'm going to sprint this last whatever distance it is. But that middle of the race is where you're most efficient. And when you stop and get derailed, you're not in the middle of the race anymore. It's like you fell and you got to get back up and start against all that's working against you. So if we acknowledge it for what it is and realize this is inefficient at this point, but then focus on building up the momentum to get to that efficiency, I think that will help easier. And this is a long way to answer this question. Sometimes it's just starting right there. What does Teddy Roosevelt says? Start with what you have, where you are, however you can do. I'm paraphrasing that comment, but
Totally.
That's what you do. If it means today getting up and you're like, man, I can't go to the gym, but you know what? I can do 100 push-ups by my bed. Then do the 100 push-ups this morning. It's like, I can't get to the gym. I'm lazy. I'm tired. Okay, maybe you ought to just eat right, or maybe you ought to just worry about your water intake today and get that right. And then tomorrow you can build on that. Tomorrow you can build on that. The next day you can build on that. The only other thing, and I think we beat a dead horse when we talk a lot about this, but it's worth mentioning, is getting back to the importance of why you're doing what you're doing. I don't want to come across as trite. I don't want to come across as just saying, oh, start with why, because that's what everybody says.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, if you're deeply connected to whatever the purpose of you doing that action is, then that will help you get through the challenging and difficult times that you're inevitably going to face when you're on your pursuit.
That's so true. Well, and I think where most guys fail is exactly in that space of like, oh, I messed up today. And don't get me wrong, like there's some power in a new day. And it's actually quite fascinating. I've always thought that was interesting, that as humans, and maybe it's by God's design or whatever it is, but there is a sense of renewal that comes with tomorrow. And why? Because I slept, like, but for whatever reason there is. And that's refreshing for us. And maybe we should take advantage of it. But I would even say that, like, if you can break that down even further, do that, right? If you mess up at breakfast and you're like, man, I ate a bad breakfast, recommit right then to go, you know what, rest of the day, I'm eating better. Or I missed my workout this morning. Oh, you know what? I'm going to try to get out of the office early. I'm going to get a workout in at lunch or before dinner. Like, don't give up even in the day just because we make a mistake.
Yeah.
Recommit and try to get back on path. The sooner the better. Don't wait for Monday. Worst case, start tomorrow. But I would even argue there's not even a reason to wait until tomorrow.
I think that's valuable advice. And maybe it's just manufacturing something. Like in your own mind, you think, I've never really considered this, but as you're bringing it up, maybe every hour is a new hour. And that instead of this is the start of the new day, this is the start of a new hour. I had a baseball coach, Matt Labram. He's still a good friend of mine. He's over a couple of weeks ago here at my place. And he would say, you're only as good as your last at bat.
Yeah.
And what we tend to do, a couple of things we tend to do. One, we tend to rest on our laurels because we had a good at bat previously. And then if you do that, then you're going to break down the mechanics of your swing and you're going to have a bad at bat. Or alternatively, you're going to have a bad at bat and think that you're a pile of shit when you're not. And you're going to use that to self-destruct and have another bad at bat. So you're only as good as your last at bat means take your last at bat, do whatever you can do to make that a success. And then at that point, you have to chalk it up, not the lessons, but you have to chalk up the results. Like, hey, I struck out. Yeah, I think about that in regards to my marriage. It's harder because we're talking about life-altering situations here, but the reality is I can just chalk that up at this point. That's not to say that I'm taking it lightly. It's not to say that I'm not trying to extract lessons that go into the rest of my life. But yeah, I messed those things up. I got to chalk that up, and now I got to drive on because I'm only as good as my last at bat, or I'm only as bad as my last at bat. And now today is something new, and I can make something new of my life.
Yeah, I really like that manufactured idea. I really like that a lot. Like, I can't relate to baseball too much, but like in high school, I played tennis, and that actually was my mindset.
Hold on.
I'm reaching out to the other group of guys that didn't play baseball, that weren't athletic enough to play baseball. I'm just joking.
Tennis is great. They don't watch or listen to the Order of Man podcast. They're looking for the Order of Woman podcast.
Yeah, there's no guys listening that play tennis. Help me out here, guys. You know what? Flood Ryan's DMs and criticize him for criticizing.
Bring it on. Bring it on. Like, I'm not even worried in the slightest.
Can I try to use my analogy here, though? I mean, it might be applicable. Just give me a chance here. So in a match, you have multiple games. And that's how I always saw it, right? It's like, if I lost that game 40-love or 40-15 or whatever, it's like, all right, nothing I can do about it. This next game's mine. And and it was just the same equivalent. It's just a manufactured way to reset and recommit and show up differently, literally 15 minutes later, and it's like, we need to manufacture that in our lives. I like that idea of just, it's a new hour.
Let's just be clear. The baseball analogy was a lot better. Proceed.
Yeah. All right. Patrick Cajon, how about dealing with the loss of a pet? I've almost felt heartless telling them to put him down after a brief illness, but he was not doing well. I now have to tell the rest of the family. It was my daughter's cat she wanted when she was 8, and she's now 20, and has been my shadow since I work out of my house a lot. I know this is not going to be easy on her, and I want to shield her grief, but I want her to experience life and death.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the pet thing in a minute, but I'm going to talk about the underlying principle of leadership here first. one thing that's going to happen if you make decisions this way, and again, whether it's pet related or anything else related, is that you're not going to have buy-in from the people that you're trying to lead, and you become the villain because you made a decision that they may or may not have agreed with, and they're not going to buy into that decision.
And they're going to have to deal with the repercussions with no say or involvement in the process, right?
And then you look like the dick. So she's 20 years old. I hope, barring some other circumstances I'm not aware of, she's fully capable of comprehending what's happening here. So you need to talk with her, not to her. There's a distinction. You need to talk to her as you talking to her or at her. With her is open dialogue and conversation. Hey, hon, little fur baller here, whatever, we've had for 12 years. And she's been a great cat. She's been a great member of the family, but she's not doing well. I think you know that. Here's a couple options, but I really care about your input. Okay. So what do you think we should do here? I would think that she's probably going to come up with the same conclusion that you are. But let her make that decision. Now, the only reason you wouldn't do that is because it'll be hard for her. Yeah, well, welcome to life. We all have to make difficult decisions. If it wasn't, it would be weird. But we all have to make difficult decisions, and sparing our people, in this case, your daughter, from making a difficult decision and shielding her from that is not doing her any service. So talk with her, explain the situation, let her present the idea, which I'm pretty sure that's what will happen. And then, you can figure out the best way to go from there. As far as losing a pet, this sucks. I mean, we lost several years ago the best dog I ever had, Sarge. And what an incredible dog. Incredible dog. You met Sarge. Yeah. And one day he was acting very strange, almost walking around the house like he was stumbling, like he was drunk almost. And then we all went to bed, and usually Sarge would jump up in my oldest son's bed, and he jumped up in the bed, and then my oldest son came in somewhere in the night and said, hey, he's not, like, something's wrong with Sarge. He's not moving, or I told him to get down and he wouldn't. And I went in there and he was locked up. Like, he wouldn't move. Like, I had to pick him up, and he's a big dog. I had to pick him up and move him, and he couldn't move work his back legs. The next morning I had to bring him downstairs and put him outside, and to see him try to go to the bathroom outside was like, he had to force himself to do that. So we took him into the clinic, the vet, and the vet didn't know what was going on. I thought it was neurological, but I thought it was probably maybe a tick, an illness from a tick, because there was a lot of ticks in Maine, and that happens. So the vet said, hey, you need to take this dog down to the animal hospital in Portland. So brought him down there, and long story short, inoperable brain tumor. Just wrapped around his brain. And had a lot of conversations about what that looked like. Now, my son was younger than your 20-year-old at the time, but had a lot of conversations with him and the rest of the family about the way that this has to go down. And we were all there. I was in the room. My ex-wife is in the room. My oldest son, his dog, was in the room. And we thought maybe we shouldn't have him in the room, but no, it made sense for him to be there to say goodbye and go through that process, although it was hard. And then they said, would you like us to take care of the remains of the dog? I said, no, I'll bring him home. And I made sure that my oldest son helped me dig that dog's grave, because it's not like I could have gone and done it by myself, and I would have felt a whole lot better about it, because I felt like I was shielding him the emotional trauma of having to do it himself. But it's part of the process, and it's a way to say goodbye. And he was involved from all the way through the entire span of the dog's life, including his death. And from there, conversations, have a lot of open conversations about memories, and we've got pictures. And fortunately I had a couple of great people that follow the podcast offer to do artwork. So we've got artwork of the dog, so I don't know if that helps, but that was our last experience, and it will happen again, but that was our last experience.
Yeah. It's great. All right, Kevin Boovy What, if anything, do you intend to add to the IC experience to increase the value members receive? I have a lot of high caliber men have been leaving once the new car Snell is gone, and much more offered than the BT relationships, which are most conducted over the phone and not on mighty networks. And I think if you don't mind me adding to Kevin's question, you know, one of the things that I talk about quite a bit when we talk about leveling up with battle team leaders is, number one reason guys join the Iron Council, accountability. Number one thing that guys ask for more of is accountability. And maybe even your viewpoint of kind of even preparing guys to join the Iron Council that might be listening, that say, hey, Ryan, I want accountability. And then they show up and get a little bit of it and go, you know, this is uncomfortable. Because I think that's part of the new car smell too, is that I'm just not going to join some group and I'm going to be caused to change without effort on my part and everything else. So anyhow.
Yeah, well, when you first asked the question, my first response is, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And I'm going to look, by the way, I'm going to answer the question in the spirit that it was asked, but that's actually a really important question. And we hear questions like this all the time, don't we, Kip? Not just about the Iron Council, but about life. Like, oh, my work environment's miserable. What my bosses aren't doing what I think they should.
What could my boss do to make it better? Yeah.
And granted, look, two things can exist simultaneously. Your boss could do a lot more at work to make it better, or your wife could do a lot more in the relationship to improve the dynamic of the relationship. That can be true. And also simultaneously, so can you.
Yeah.
And we should constantly be striving to do our part so that we can improve our environment. So my question for you in the Iron Council is, what are you going to do about it? Have you asked that? And what I mean by that is, are you doing the battle plan 100%? Are you getting on your team calls 100% of the time? Are you sticking to your goals and getting 100% on your numbers? Are you doing the vision work? Are you doing the monthly assignments? Are you doing the monthly topics? Are you going to the calls that are the one-off calls that different members do? James Percival did one on finding a battle team the other day. Alan did one on building better habits just last week, and it was amazing. There's so much there that if you did that 100% of what was already there, that question, I think at that point, becomes a lot less relevant because you're doing 100% with what's currently there. So that's what I would say first is, why don't you show me what you're doing, and then we'll talk about the rest of that question. Because if we're not getting 100% in our life, and again, I think about a relationship. If you're not getting 100% in your relationship goals, before you ask her to change, figure out what you can do 100% better and see if that doesn't change the dynamic of the relationship. Now, I hear it. I already hear it. People are like, well, Ryan, I mean, yeah, but if she doesn't change, yes, she might not. We don't know. She might not respond favorably. You working your butt off at work more so than you have in the past might not get your boss to change. But don't you want to know that?
Yeah. And aren't you better off anyway?
Of course you are.
Of course you are. Yeah.
So do all of that 100%. And then see if that improves your experience, whatever experience that we're talking about. That's number one.
Totally. Can I suggest something really quick, or
Yeah.
throw a wrench in your comment? And not a wrench, maybe propose maybe some additional thoughts from you is what, and Kevin, you're not saying this, I get that, but like what Kevin might say or other people might say is, but Ryan, that's not my job, right? Like my job, my boss should be doing X, and my job is to do Y, and you're telling me I should be doing X, that I should be, but that's not my responsibility.
Yeah.
And thus I shouldn't have to do those things.
Well, two things with that. I'm glad you brought that up. Number one, you don't have to. Nobody's telling you have to. I think the only times you could say that I have to do this is because you're either going to end up dead or somebody you love is going to end up dead because you don't do it. Outside of that, you have a choice in everything. And I'm not saying it free of consequences just because it's a tough choice, but you don't have to do anything. You don't have to engage with your relationship. You don't have to pour into your business. You don't have to invest in the Iron Council. Nobody's telling you have to. We're just telling you if you do, life might improve for you. So let's get that one off the table right now. But as far as the not my responsibility, it's not your responsibility if you don't care about the results. But if you care about the results, then you're damn right it's your responsibility. Like if you care about your work, if you care about your work environment, if you care about your employees, if you care about the people around you, for you to say, well, that's not my responsibility, then you don't care about your goals. If you're in your marriage and your wife's not treating you the way you think you deserve to be treated, but you realize you're showing up 70% of the way you could show up, to say it's not my responsibility is an abdication of responsibility. It's an abdication of your commitments. And look, I always have to throw this disclaimer out here. I'm not perfect on this stuff, but I'm trying to face reality the way that it is. And the reality is that I don't show up 100% of the time, but I don't have the right to want more and then to simultaneously say, but it's not my responsibility. If I want more, it absolutely is my responsibility. But if I don't care about it, then I can chalk it up to not my responsibility. But again, we have to wrap our heads around the concept that two things can exist simultaneously. At work, it can be my responsibility as an employee, and it can also be my boss's or leadership's responsibility. We often hear with relationships, it's not 50-50, it's 100-100. I believe that. It is my responsibility and also it's somebody else's responsibility. We can both share the responsibility. We're not even sharing. We're both taking 100% of the responsibility.
Well,
so,
and when we, oh, go ahead.
Nope, you're good. Go. I just want to finish on the thought with the spirit of the question, because I am going to answer the spirit of the question. I just want to make sure we're reframing this a little bit in a way that I believe has served me better in my life, although it's been more challenging at times than just to wave my responsibility away. But I do want to answer the question in the spirit in which it was asked, which I will get to.
Got it. No, go ahead. Finish. You're good.
Okay. As far as the spirit of the question, man, you and I just had a great conversation, Kit, before we hit record on this about developing a leadership development program. We've got an overcoming pornography course that's available to our Iron Council members. I got a call on Wednesday or Thursday of this week with a good friend, Tanner Guzzi, who focuses on man's presence and persona and their style. He's going to be putting together a course. I have a good friend, Keith Yackey, who's putting together a course on building a more powerful, more rich, fulfilled marriage. Johnny Loretti, my fitness instructor and nutritionist, is putting together a course on nutrition. These things will all be available. The other thing is I'm starting to do more lives where I just jump on sporadically and randomly and talk about issues that the guys in the Iron Council want to talk about. That's going to be something that comes online. We're also going to be releasing the podcast, the interview podcast, unedited and raw to our Iron Council members before it goes public. So you'll have, and that's not as important, the raw unedited version, because there's not a whole lot of changes that go into our podcast. Unless maybe a guest
gets cut for a reason,
request.
Right?
Yeah. But there's not really a whole lot of like editing and fine tuning, hardly any at all. But what you will get in that is you'll get before the pre-interview, if you will, and the post-interview. And over 8 years of doing this, I've realized that some of the best advice I've ever received or gotten from podcast guests is before I hit record or after I stop recording. Yeah. And so that's a thing of the past. Iron Council members will have access to that. So there are things that we're implementing and we're going to continue to push and move the needle and try new things in addition to what's already there. So be on the lookout for those things.
I love it. I love it. That's a lot in the mix, man. I love it. And Kevin, thanks for letting us, spin your question, and talk really about taking some ownership over our lives as part of his question around growth in the IC. So I like it. Okay.
I think there's something on that, Kit,
yeah,
just to mention very quickly is, and that was Kevin, right?
Yes. Yeah,
I don't think Kevin will, but I just want to throw this out here because sometimes I've had guys take things personally when I suggest. I don't think less of anybody when they ask questions that I spin a little bit or give a different perspective. And it's not even an indictment. Hell, it's not even a question you may be asking. Like you may be fully on board with what we're saying, right? I don't know. So I don't ever want guys to think like, oh, this is an indictment against you and you're an idiot. And I used to have that attitude. I don't have that attitude anymore. What we're trying to do is we're trying to take your singular question and broaden it out as wide as we can go so that we can serve as many men as possible. So although in Kevin's instance, that might not have anything to do with what he was thinking, but I guarantee there's thousands, if not tens of thousands of people who will listen to this podcast in the coming days and weeks that have the mentality that we talked about. So what I would like to suggest is, Kevin, because you had the balls to ask the question, you now have served other men because you got the conversation started that we wouldn't have otherwise had. So guys, like, and also there's no point to taking anything personally in life, even if it's personal.
Yeah.
Learn what you can, ask yourself if it's objectively true and helpful, take what you want. And that's life.
Yep. I like it. All right, we're going to hop over to some questions from Facebook. Join us there, facebook.com/group/order of man. Eric Tyler. Hey guys, I'm sorry if this has been discussed before on the podcast, but as someone who is currently unhappy with my career, I've decided that I would like to go back to school. The only problem is that I can't choose on if I want to go to a trade school for carpentry or a typical 4-year college for business. Any advice? I appreciate everything that you are doing. God bless.
Okay, a couple things. Number one, don't apologize and then do what you say you're sorry for.
Yeah.
So you don't need to be sorry for asking. It's a good question. We don't need,
Yeah.
there's no need to be sorry about that. You're asking a solid question. I'm sure we've addressed things like this before, but you haven't heard it. So you don't need to apologize.
Yeah.
And it gives us an opportunity to talk about it. Number two, be careful of either or fallacies or false dichotomies. Should I go to trade school or should I go to more traditional 4-year route? As in, those are the only two options available. And they're not. There's an infinite number of possibilities available. For example, I don't know what you do for work. Does he suggest what he does for work?
He doesn't.
No. I don't know what you do for work, but you might have a great employer or a great organization you're working with. Maybe the culture is amazing. Maybe you're getting paid well, but you don't like the specific work. Maybe there's an opportunity for a lateral move or a vertical move, hopefully up, not down. But
yeah. Or you like the work, but you don't like who you're with or the company that you're working for. And now you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater because it's not enjoyable. Yeah.
Right. And we're only bringing this up as an option or something else to explore. I've also seen companies who, if you like the work to some degree, and you said you don't like the work, I know you said that, but we're just trying to get to the root of what you might mean by that. But there's even organizations that I've seen that will be willing to pay for credentialing and extra schooling if you're more interested in that line of work, but moving up the chain of command, where they'll actually pour and invest into you. I don't know if that's available, but those are opportunities. Other opportunities, when I hear you talk about it, it almost sounds like, hey, I'm going to quit and go to trade school, or I'm going to quit and I'm going to go to a 4-year college, course or route or degree. Maybe that's the route for you. I don't know. But maybe there's an opportunity for you to continue to work while you do this in the evenings or in the mornings, and you pick up a couple of classes and you try to figure out what it is you're interested in before you just burn the boats. And I know that's popular in the self-development space, but I've got a family, I've got responsibilities. For me just to burn everything to the ground because I want to go, find myself, like that's not a possibility for me right now. So yeah, I think there's some other avenues to explore. Now, with regards to your question, here's one. I can't tell you what you should do. Nobody can. But here's a little exercise that I think might help you. If you were to fast forward your life, let's say 15 years, 20 years, looking back on your life now, which decision will you be grateful and glad that you made? So again, looking ahead to your life, 15, 20 years, and then looking back on it currently where you're making this decision, which decision would the future you be happy, grateful, and fulfilled that you made? That's a really, really powerful exercise because it allows you to see things outside of the current reality. The current reality is financially related, emotionally related. You might feel like a quitter if you leave. You might put your family in some financial hardship initially if you do this. There's a lot of stuff that's present. And I'm not saying it's unimportant. Many of those factors are very, very important right now. But this exercise allows you to make a decision, or at least consider a decision, without all the current extra baggage that you have right now. And that exercise has been really, really valuable for myself and also valuable for a lot of guys that ask very similar questions to what he's asking right now.
Totally. Well, and I mean, there's so many things to consider here, right? Like whenever I hear go back, 4-year college degree in business, I always say, what does that mean? Like, what does that translate to as a job for you? Because that's the other thing. And I'm saying this about Eric, but how often do we get people that are like, well, I'll get educated and then and then just work will happen for me, right? And it's like, well, how does that translate to a skill that's valuable? And what's the long-term play here? Back to your point, Ryan, will you like carpentry? Do you know that? Oh no, well, I just thought. And it's like, well, what if you don't like that either, right? So there's a bunch of things here that like flush out in regards to what I don't know, you enjoy. What do you like doing? Is the business degree really to start your own carpentry business, as well as like, and Eric's probably already evaluating this, but like the trades, the demand for skill sets in that area is skyrocketing, right? And so, what's happening in the market, where are jobs going? Do you want to own your own business in the future? If that's the case, is your probability of getting into that market as a trade is a lot higher. Like there's lots of things to consider above and beyond just, college degree versus trade school. I'm not sure if that helps. Probably adds more anxiety.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like, so basically the answer that we have for you on this is we don't know, but here's a bunch of other shit to worry about to make the decision harder. Good luck.
Yeah. It's probably true.
I mean, that's the reality of it, is like, we don't know, but here are some different considerations. And maybe you can start looking at it in a different way that might help you come to a better conclusion for yourself. Because I can't tell you what you should do, but there's some factors to consider. I think what you said was really helpful about like, is this going to, if you go, are you going to like it? Is that going to lead to a job? Where are careers going? Where's technology going? Those are factors that I think are really important to consider in these decisions.
Yeah. Well, and I can't help but hear the unhappy in my career thing, and once again, right, we're spinning your question, Eric, but how often do guys have opportunities placed before them right now? Like I could probably do this right now, Ryan. I could probably think in my life right now, in my current situation, how many opportunities of growth I have that I'm not executing on. I could level up in a particular skill set. I could tackle something that I'm not tackling today within my job. I could take advantage of opportunities that Ryan would probably be willing to give me, but I'm not maximizing them.
Nah.
How many? Yeah, maybe. But how many things are left on the table that we're not magnifying? And so make sure that wherever you are right now, that you're magnifying it. That the job that you have right now that you're quote unquote unhappy with, maybe what you need to do is figure out why you're unhappy about it. And maybe it's about trying to be happy where you are so you can show up powerfully and grow with whatever you have. And I think, once again, it's agnostic to the question. Can we all do that and grow where we are? Without a doubt. And without a doubt, we should, while also preparing for what the future looks like. Just don't pass up opportunities that are placed before us.
Yeah. Only little point of exception to that is I was going to say I would caution, but I don't think I would caution. I don't like the idea of like, you just try to be happy with where you are right now or what you're doing. And I don't think you were totally saying that, but I think some people could interpret it that way. I'd rather say to you, why don't you worry about being more fulfilled? And fulfillment comes from achieving and honoring our responsibilities. And we don't do that 100%. Now, I'm not saying you don't do that. I'm saying all of us don't do that 100%. Totally. And this goes back to our previous question. If we do that 100%, at that point, it's kind of like I don't know an analogy. I'm trying to think of it now. Like a video game. You have to get a certain point before you unlock the next level. And to me, if you're operating at 70%, I don't care if you call it God, karma, the universe, whatever, the muse. If you don't get 100%, you don't unlock the next level. Like if you're operating at 70%, you really don't have room to complain about like, I'm not happy or I'm not fulfilled or I'm not achieving what I want to achieve. I think I'd be happier or more fulfilled somewhere else. That might be true, but we actually don't know because you're not operating at 100% yet.
Yeah.
If you do it at 100%, two things are going to happen. You're going to find more fulfillment where you currently are, or you're going to walk away from where you currently are with a clean conscience because you know you were doing 100%, whether it was a relationship, a business venture, your finances, your fitness. I mean, how many guys bounce around on a fitness program? It didn't work. Well, did you follow it to the letter? No, because I was busy with work. And like, the guy said to go in 4 days a week, but I went in, 2. And I didn't do all the workouts because I don't really like those ones. And then I kind of laxed at night. But like, I just need to do something different because this isn't working. No, you're not working. It's not the program, it's you. So make sure you're working before you say the program's not.
Totally. All right, Joseph Medeiros. I am an only child. My parents have settled for a life of complacency. Recently, they got kicked out of their rental for not paying rent during COVID, and
I already know where
forced
this
to
is
move in
going.
with my grandparents.
Can I guess where this is going?
Yeah, go for it.
I think what he's going to ask is, how do I get my parents to like get their shit together?
Perfect. Yep. How do you change other adults?
Let's hear the rest of his question though.
Okay. What do I do about my parents? I've talked to them multiple times about living a meaningful life. I can't help but feel, being the only child, that I'm somewhat responsible for their actions. How do I get rid of this mindset that I have?
I watched The Guardian the other night with Ashton Kutcher and Kevin Costner. It's a great movie. Have you seen it?
No, but it's like they're like firefighters or something, right? Is that right?
Like
Coast Guard.
divers, like Coast Guard rescue divers.
Yeah, that's right. I know what movie you're talking about, but I haven't seen it.
You should watch it. Any man should watch it. It's really good.
Got it.
Really good. And Ashton Kutcher asked Kevin Costner, like, how do you know who to save? And Kevin Costner says, I come to the first one and I save them, and I go back out and I go back out and I save them. And when I can't do any more, the sea takes the rest. Like, all you can do is swim as hard as you can. And at some point, the sea is going to take the rest. And that's so hard. We're talking about your parents, man. That's what makes this question hard. Because if it was just some random person, you'd be like, yeah, that guy needs to get his act together. Man, I mean, I wish he would, but I can't do any of that. He's got to really do it. And then you see it in the context of someone you love, and you know the answer, but because it's somebody you're so committed to or so loyal to or so obligated to because they raised you, I hear that one a lot, that you owe them something. You don't. No, that's not true. I'll take that back. You do owe them something. You owe them 100% of your effort, but you do not owe them results of their own life. And you, even on the 100% effort, there's a caveat to that. They have to, and I've said this, they have to be willing to participate in the rescue. And if they're not going to participate in the rescue, man, as painful as it is to see people you love make bad decisions, and I have people like that in my life, I got to go serve somebody else. And look, I'm going to keep the door open. It's like the prodigal son, he leaves and he goes out and he sows his oats and he comes back. And what does the dad do? He runs to his son and embraces his son. He doesn't chase him. He lets him do his life. He lets him learn his experiences. He lets him go through hardship, and he prays over his son, and he thinks about and contemplates what his son is going through. And the minute his son returns, he doesn't close the gate and say, oh, well, all those years. No, he opens the gate and he sees him coming from his tower, and he runs down his house and he meets him in the lane and embraces him as a father. And that might be a situation you have right here. You've done everything that you can do. You've shared, you've probably given financial resources, you've talked with them about it. And at this point, I don't know the ramifications or all the intricacies of your situation, but at this point, they're adults and they need to make those decisions. But you should remain open, an open door policy, but you don't step out anymore. You have to allow them to step in. That's all you can do.
Totally.
And by the way, you probably have your own family to worry about.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't know if he's married. I don't know if he has kids. It doesn't matter if he does. Like, you have other responsibilities you have to take care of. So make sure you're not exerting all this energy on somebody who doesn't appreciate it or is ever going to implement it, so that you can pour fully into the people who are like, hey, dad, look at me. Hey, husband, look at me. I was really guilty of this over the past couple of years. And I wish I would have done it differently. And I am going to do it differently and am currently doing it differently now, but I want to pour into them.
Totally. You know, Joseph, the one tactic, or I guess my share around how I've changed my mindset around this, and it's applicable to all things, right? So if we're talking about an employee that's not fulfilling the roles and responsibilities of a position, right? Or your parents aren't showing up how you think they should, or a friend isn't showing up how they think they should, or whatever. The mindset is the way we change our mindset is understanding human behavior. And there's a big difference between me coercing, shaming, blaming, manipulating Ryan into doing something that I think is good for him versus Ryan choosing what's best for him. And one comes with commitment, change, and transformation. The other one comes with, well, I'm just only doing this to get him off my back. And that's not a long-term strategy anyway. Could we get your parents to make some changes? You could probably stonewall them. You could probably withhold your love and your affection for them. And there's all kinds of things that we could do to manipulate the situation, maybe, but it's all out of what reason? And that's not what's going to move the needle. And to be frank, that's not how adults work, right? We need to come to those conclusions on their own. They need to learn on their own. We can support them, but that's how you make change. So like from an example of like an employee that's not executing, my job as a leader is to identify what winning looks like, what's expected of them, and ask if they will commit to doing it and how I can support them. But if they go, yeah, you know what, Ryan, I'm not, it's not for me, or I'm not in, then it's done. And we got to treat them that way. And your parents are no different. You can support them in it, but the way you get rid of your mindset of the way they should or should not be is getting really present to the idea that this is for them to learn and grow from. And if they choose to learn and grow in their certain circumstance and not be complacency have complacency in their life, that's their decision. And they're just maybe not there yet. And it is what it is. And let go of the expectation that you have of what they should or should not do. Now, it's okay to have an opinion that like they would be better off, so we can support them, but support them in making that decision on their own is the proper approach.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Tony Simon. Hello, men. When you lose yourself and leave your path, what actions or resources do you use to get back on track? For example, I have had a running routine and I was on a diet to do other commitments and I had stopped, and now I'm having trouble being consistent with exercise and diet. Same thing for journaling and reading. Thank you very much for what you do. Kind of similar to that question earlier.
Yeah, I feel like we
maybe
answered
anything
this one
that you would add. Okay.
Again, first step, figuring out why journaling, or why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Like, are you doing that because somebody told you it was a good idea to do it? Or are you doing it because
you're not
real
committed
value
to
that
it?
comes? Yeah. Is there real value to it for you? If there is, then you should probably continue doing that. If somebody else told you to do it, I don't think that's a reason to sustain it. I think that actually could be a reason to try it, because somebody credible in your life says, hey, I've been journaling and it's been amazing and you should try it. That's actually, for me, that's reason enough to be like, oh yeah, well, I trust that guy. He's having success. I think I'll give that a try. And I'll ask him a few more questions about how to make it effective for me. But it's not a reason to continue something. You actually have to find value in it. It has to be driving your life forward. It has to be serving you in some way. We do this with hobbies a lot. I mean, you and I talk about jujitsu quite often. So it's like, well, man, order man, I got to do jujitsu. Why? Because I said, or because Kip said? That's a good reason to try it. Like, yeah, what do you mean? Because Kip's a black belt, so you got to listen to black belts.
Yeah, listen.
So yeah, get back to the root of why you're doing it. And then we got our 12-week battle planners. This is what I use, so you can pick that out at the store. It's where is it at? Orderaman.com/TWBP as in 12-week battle planner. I use this religiously. This is what I use every single day. I already went through and did everything today that I need to do. And I'll check it off as I get it done. And outside of that, maybe start again with the consistency in something small. So I think it's the same question basically. Yeah. And I hope that first one served you.
Well, and Tony, in the IC right now, we're deep diving into Atomic Habits, that book. And so maybe as a resource, just because it's fresh on my mind from our discussions internally, that, look at some resources, look at changing habits,
Yeah.
make sure you make them easy. There's a bunch of resources from that perspective.
Well, and that even with a bit of bias, that actually might be something to consider because in August, not excuse me, not August, in September, we're opening up the Iron Council again, and maybe just having people around you with a system in place is enough of a jolt, like the defibrillator. Let me jolt you out of this
Framework.
because there's some accountability and you have a new system to run on. That might help too.
Yep. Yep. All right. Corey Brenton, my 15-year-old son just tonight saw one of his friends have a really bad accident. He didn't
Mm.
die, but severely hurt. My son was first and the only one on the scene for a while. He called 911, applied emergency care, kept pressure on the wounds, and kept his friend awake to avoid any shock until EMTs arrived. Here's my question. Outside of listening to my son and being there for him, getting him to see a counselor, is there anything else I should be doing to help him work through this? I understand that you nor Kip are mental health counselors. I'm just wondering from a father's aspect, what am I missing or needing to do? Thanks for your input and thanks for the great podcast as always, trying to help us all get better.
I mean, the first thing I hear in that is that a 15-year-old called the police. He sounds like he was calm, cool, and collected. He applied pressure. He stayed with the victim, who was a friend, it sounded like, and he got the
Proud
job
dad,
done. I
proud
mean,
dad moment right there.
what an
Yeah.
amazing, amazing young man that he can have the emotional and mental presence to be able to keep his cool enough to do what he needed to do. I don't know if that's training you've given him or encouraged him to do or something else, but man, you guys ought to be proud of that for sure. To Kip's point.
Totally.
I think you're doing everything. That's the hard thing is sometimes the results don't come as fast as we would like, or we want to make sure we're not missing any bases. And it doesn't sound like you are to me. The only thing I would add, and I imagine just based on the brief question that you asked here, is that you're just there and you're present. And it probably it doesn't even revolve around working through this specific acute instance that he's dealing with. It's just being there and present. So it might be, hey, bud, let's go play baseball. One thing my kids have told me, my two oldest kids, is sometimes when I have a serious conversation, and I don't do this deliberately, but I ask them in a position that they feel like they can't escape from it. Like I might do it in the car when they're stuck with me, and they're like, oh, every time we're in the car, dad wants to have this deep, deep, dive conversation into something and they can't leave because they're stuck in the car. So that's not creating
Yeah.
a real warm environment for them to be able to open up and share and be honest about what all of us are dealing with. So I have to work on that personally. And that means that sometimes I'm not going to have a deep discussion on what's going on. I'm just going to ask about football or baseball. Hey, let's go play catch. Or we have a basketball hoop. Hey, let's go play basketball. And I'm not doing it as a ploy to talk. I'm doing it as a ploy to just be there and be present with my kids. And if they want to talk about their favorite basketball player, cool. My second son loves shoes. So if he wants to talk about this new pair of shoes he's trying to save money for, cool. We can talk about that. If he wants to talk about girls or wants to talk about what it's like going through living in two different households, we could talk about that. I just leave it open and I don't need to steer the conversation. I just need to be part of it. And that's something I'm working on. I can't tell you I'm great at that, but that is something I'm working on and something that I haven't always been really good at. So that's what I'm trying to do. That might help you a little bit.
I like it. Austin Chamberlain, what are some good tips to start a business? I'm looking to start a firearm instruction business and have much to learn about the business aspect.
Yeah, I mean, hiring coaches is a big component of this, like hiring people who are successful. Too often we overlook that. We think that we can do it on our own. And you're smart, you're intelligent. You could probably do it on your own. You could figure a lot of stuff out. You could watch what other firearm companies are doing. You could do that and be fairly successful. But it's going to take longer and it's going to cost more to do it that way. But what
Yeah.
if you could invest into a qualified mentor or coach who could help you with the business aspect of it? And yeah, it's hard because you're swallowing this big out-of-pocket cost, but they're going to expedite the time frame and they're going to help you get results and income that much quicker. So look, at all the other advice you're going to get, I would say that if you can find a qualified coach or mentor that can help you build this kind of business, that would be worth its weight in gold and something far too many people overlook. The other thing I would say about business, and I can't give you all the answers here just because of time constraints, and I don't have all the answers myself, is you need to start getting good at marketing and you need to use social media as a tool to be able to do it, especially with firearms content. It's pretty hard. I think it's harder with firearms content because a lot of the big social media companies limit and restrict what you can share and post and how you can promote. But there are things that you can do to be able to promote your services, promote your business. I'd get good at meeting people in the area because this is clearly a business where people need to be there with you. So it's working with law enforcement, it's working with first responders, it's working with military members. I mean, it might even be school teachers who are worried about, that type of situation at their school. They might not be able to carry a firearm, but they want to be familiar and proficient with firearms. It could be single mothers who are at home and there's no man in the house. And so they're left with the task of everything, including the safety and protection of their children. And they want to know how to use a firearm. So if that day comes, heaven forbid, that they would be proficient enough to ward off an attacker and keep their family safe. Like, there's all sorts of little veins that you can explore here. And if you can find these groups in your area and you can go to meetings, you can do presentations, you can invite people out, you can even do voluntary work with the fire departments, like a voluntary fire department. You can go on ride-alongs with police officers. You can offer free training with, and I'm going to say this, with no expectation in return. Hear me on that. No expectation in return. Too many guys will go do free workshops and then try to sell a bunch of stuff afterwards. Just go and serve. Let people know what you're about, but don't go with an expectation that you're trying to sell these guys. You're just trying to serve them, because people will sniff that out and be repulsed by it, not attracted to it. So that's where I'd focus. Business mentor, good at online and social marketing. And you can hire mentors for that. And some of those are inexpensive because it's all done online in group coaching environments. And then get good at networking in your community and in your area and find those veins and niches that can serve you.
Cool. The only thing I'd add is minimal viable product. Don't get wrapped up in like how perfect this looks and then try to get it perfect, right? Like, there's huge value in you doing firearm instruction today, whether it's one-on-one training with the neighbor or through a community group or whatever. You need the reps as fast as possible. You need to flush out demographics and ideas. And a lot of that is found in doing a minimal viable product and trying out things and seeing what works, what doesn't work, and then make your necessary pivots. Don't fall into this idea that you need a brick and mortar building and all this hype, and then I'll start doing it. That will be the failure of most small businesses, I think, in my opinion.
I think that's awesome advice. I mean, I told people, if you are serious about starting a business, we're recording this on Monday, you could have your business up and running by Friday or earlier.
Boy.
If it were me, like a firearms business, if it were me, I could have my business up and running tonight. Because I could go to LegalZoom or Rocket Lawyer or any of these like online legal places, or maybe had a CPA, I don't know, or an accountant, excuse me, an attorney. I could get my LLC set up. That's what you're going to need, especially if you're doing firearms, because you want that layer of protection. Go talk with your accountant, your CPA on that. But you get your LLC taken care of, and you call 5 friends tonight and you're like, hey guys, like, I'm going to go teach some firearms training. Bring your own gun. If you don't have one, I've got a few spares. It might not be exactly what you want, but I've got a few spare for you. And it's $30. That's going to get you, refreshments, drink, that sort of thing. And it's going to get you, 50 rounds. I don't know the price. I'm just saying it's going to get you whatever. And we're all going to be out there at 6 o'clock. We're going to meet at the chapel, down the road, and we're going to head over to the range together.
And if you can have a business,
you can have a business right now.
Totally. And if you don't mind, my buddy Steve's going to come along, take some pictures if it's okay with you guys. I'll have you sign some documents so I can use that for the website and a couple of marketing things. And I'd love to get you guys' input of what worked and what didn't work, why we're shooting, and what you liked most about it.
Yep, that's awesome. One other thing to that, Kip, always sell something. You're not hanging out as friends. That's not the purpose of this. If you're doing what we're telling you, that's not the purpose of this meeting or this thing tonight. It's not to hang out. If you wanted to hang out, you can go to the bar, you can go to the game, you can do a lot of other things. The purpose of this is to build your business. And you're selling to friends who care about you, love you, want to support you, and do some cool shit together. So you have to sell it. people say, well, but it's not where I want it. Maybe I'll just give it away for free. Then you don't have a business, man. Like, we're trying to create a business here. You can discount it. I'm fine with that. But if you can't sell something, there's no business. So that's why I say, maybe it's $50. I don't know. You can discount it, but it's $50. We'll be out for 2 hours. Bring your own gun. That's going to provide you. I'll take care of the ammo, unless you have your own specialized ammo you want to shoot. Just tell me what caliber you're bringing, and I'll get that taken care of. And we'll have some sandwiches while we're out there. But sell it. Don't give it away, because we're not in charity here. We're in business. So be a business.
Yeah. Like it. All right. Last question. Corey Bright. Can you talk about the power dynamic when one spouse makes more than the other? I find it really hard that my wife makes almost twice as much as me. I have a good job, but this is something that is nagging and bothers me.
Why does it bother you? I know you can't answer that question right now, but
yeah,
consider why that bothers you. Like, you probably, because you feel less of a man. That's probably what you feel like.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I imagine that's the case. So what can you do about it? You can make more money. That's one thing you could do. Find a way to make more money. You can have some good conversations about what you add to the table. Like, there might be things that you add to the table that you can't quite quantify with a dollar amount. And there's value in that, right? Protection's a great component of that. So yeah, maybe you're not making as much money as she is, but you're a great protector. Maybe you're a great partner. Maybe you're a great father. Maybe things around the house are all done and looking beautiful because of the work that you do. Maybe you're a great cook. I don't know what you like. I don't know what you're into, but you could be great at so many other things that are just not exclusively financially related, that might help you feel better about your contributions. And you know what? There might be elements of what you do that she's really appreciative of, that you aren't aware of, number one, and that she's never expressed to you. And it's not because she doesn't want to, it's just because maybe she takes it for granted a little bit, or she doesn't really think about it, or it just doesn't get brought up, or you don't have conversations. There's a lot of reasons why that wouldn't happen. But I bet there's a lot, because if there wasn't, what would be the reason for keeping you around? She makes more than you.
Yeah.
She doesn't need you around for that. So she's interested in having a relationship with you for other reasons. What are those reasons, and where can you really pour into that side of the relationship that will help you feel better about the dynamic and also serve her more effectively? I mean, I hear about dads who stay at home. That's not for me. And I think that, generally speaking, if we look at the quality of life or happiness, I don't think that works for the majority of men and women. But if it does, then that's a decision you're making, and you need to find a way to pour fully into that as a man, so that you do feel fulfilled about your contribution to the dynamic of the relationship. But ask yourself why you're feeling that way, and get to the root of those insecurities, and then ask yourself how you can step up more fully in different ways that aren't financially related.
Yeah. I mean, this is interesting, right? Because we could get on a whole rat race around, not rat race, but like a rat hole around, feminist movement, equality of like that whole debate. But the reality of it is most men, whether good or bad, find fulfillment and purpose in life through one of the aspects of masculinity, and that is providing, right? It's an intrinsic thing for me. I get value and fulfillment knowing that I am providing for my family. And so maybe, and that's why this is kind of a good question. I kind of like this discussion. But ultimately, in the end, I think for us that we should all be finding fulfillment in how we're showing up in the world. And some of us at fault of this is, to make Corey maybe feel a little bit better, is some of us like, oh, wait, I get great fulfillment, Ryan, because I provide for my family, but I'm dropping the ball in all other areas. Right. And it's like, great, you bring money through the door, but guess what? You're a miserable person to live with. Your impact on your children is more negative than positive, and we're not winning in this world, right? Other than bringing a check through the door. So that's not even enough even for those guys. And so the point is, I guess what I'm trying to say is we need to make sure that we're present to the impact that we're leaving in the world. And that will give us fulfillment in regards to how we're showing up. And it's not just about bringing money in. It's much greater than that. And make sure that you're finding that fulfillment in those other areas and you're showing up powerfully.
Right. Right. I mean, what's the alternative? The alternative is for her to make less money, because that can help your family.
That doesn't sound like a good idea.
That doesn't sound good to me.
No.
But I think when we're making choices like this or feeling a way, I think it's good to consider the alternative. What's the alternate universe of this situation? I mean, yeah, it could be that you're making more money, and you should be working towards that if that's a goal of yours.
Yeah.
But we're not going to just strip her of household income because you're uncomfortable with it. Like, that's not going to be good for the family. I thought about one more thing that you could do. I don't know, but I tend to be pretty good with finances. So maybe she's not. Maybe she's great at earning money, but she's not great at managing it. And maybe you're a great manager of money, and you're the bigger share of that side of things with regards to what you're adding is making sure that the money management, hey, we're paying off debt, we're investing, we're tracking our income and our expenses, and you handle that side of things, and she's making it, and that's your component or contribution, not only your income, but how you guys manage that effectively.
Yeah.
Cool.
Good luck with that, Corey. Okay.
All right, brother, let's wrap it up today.
Yeah. So a handful of things. Ryan mentioned this earlier. Iron Council opening up next month. To join us and learn more about the Iron Council and get ready for that, go to orderofman.com/Iron Council. One of the things that we can do, you could probably get in 30 days, right? In or around our Battle Ready program in preparation for joining us in September. To read or learn more about that, go to orderofman.com/Battle Ready. And of course, connect with Mr. Michler on Instagram and Twitter at Ryan Michler. I guess I should be saying at X instead of at Twitter. Is that official?
I don't know. Has that
X
change taken place? I don't know.
Yeah, supposedly. It sounds weird to say connect with Ryan on X, but anyhow, that's at Ryan Michler. And of course, you can get your swag at store.orderofman.com.
Oh, it has happened. I'm looking over here on quote unquote Twitter, but it has happened.
Just an X.
Yep, just an X. Cool. All right, guys, appreciate you. Great questions today. Keep them coming. We'll keep these answers coming, and hopefully it serves you in some way. Let's all go out there, take action, and become the men we are meant to be.